Hi there, welcome to the World Championship match game 4 coverage on the Kingscrusher YouTube channel. So this is Ding Liren with the white pieces against Gukesh playing black. So knight f3, this is the 29th of November 2024. So we have the Zuckertor opening, knight f3, d5, e3, Zuckertor opening. We have now knight f6, b3. So this kind of opening was a favourite of Aaron Nimzovich. It's like trying to play the Nimzo engine with the white pieces. We have bishop f5. Just to show you what I mean, there are some games of Aaron Nimzovich after c5, bishop b2, knight c6, bishop b5. It's like a reverse Nimzo engine defence. White is trying to get good control over the e5 square. And yeah, Nimzovich had some very fine, interesting games from this position. But black is having nothing of this. Black doesn't have to commit to that. Black is actually playing, in fact, after b3, a kind of reverse London system. So the bishop quite often will go to h7 against knight h4. This kind of reverse London system setup is a very solid proposition. Okay, we have bishop e2, and now it does mean actually that, you know, potentially knight h4 could be useful for white to try and win this light square bishop. If black plays a move like e6, then white may slip in knight h4 and just grab this bishop. This might be an option. Okay, so actually the move h6 gives the bishop h7, and now bishop a3 is a logical move here. It's actually a little bit more justified with the inclusion of h6. If instead of bishop e2 we had played bishop a3 immediately, and let's say c6, bishop e2, knight bd7, black could just play like this. Actually, it's not that dangerous for black. It's an even position. So okay, bishop e2 first with the inclusion of some extra light square weakness. Bishop a3 is a little bit more justified. Knight bd7 is a very accurate move actually. It means that when the e-pawn moves, black is able to recapture with the knight. We have white castling. So if e6, is it a big deal that the king is displaced on f8? Is this actually a big deal? I've had this position a few times in bullet chess. It's a little bit uncomfortable not having the castling rights and the king on f8, you know, the rook on h8. It should be even, but in practice, perhaps white does get some practical chances. So, for example, this situation, it should be about even, but actually with the king on f8, it is trickier. You might expect this. It's trickier than usual, actually, for black to maintain the balance. As one example, let's say knight c6. This wouldn't be that accurate. C takes, knight takes, queen takes, and the king is an opportunity on f8 with queen b4 check. This kind of thing wouldn't happen if the king had just, you know, castled. Then bishop f3, okay, and then shielding, you know, protecting the rook, knight bd2, and you can see white's getting a nice advantage in this scenario. So yeah, with the king on g8 and rook on h8, this would be, you know, horrendous. So, but even in this position though, knight c6 doesn't have to be played. e5, and it seems as though, yeah, white can still get though a small edge. White's getting a small edge here. This is kind of unnecessary to give white this position with the king on f8 and the rook on h8. The rook's out of the game. One of the benefits of castling to get the rook into the game. It's out of the game. So we can see that, you know, e6, the casual move e6 is not doing black too many favours. It's a bit of an inconvenience. And yeah, one more thing in that line I've just shown you, if e4, knight e5 is possible here, and knight takes g6, this would be a horrendous structure for black. So anyway, knight bd7, very accurate move to be able to recapture on f8. So this solves the problem. This surprise opening, this does actually solve one of the initial problems. So e6 is played here. There's also the option, of course, that c5 has been facilitated with that knight bd7. We can play c4, c takes d5, bishop b2, but it's not such a big deal. This should be about even. Okay, we have e6 though, and the bishops come off. So bishop takes, knight takes. c4, knight goes back to d7. Black likes the idea of potentially castling. Knight c3. Now, as an option, c takes d5. This is just even. And also knight takes d5 is also just even. There's a lot of possibilities for equality here in this game. Knight c3 though is played, black castles. Yeah, c6 here, c takes, this is just even. And even c takes d5, it's not actually that critical. The position is not so critical that there's a move which is a disaster here. It's a pretty stable position. So knight c3, black castles, c takes, e takes. This is an accurate move though coming up. You know, for 10 points, can you spot this next move? Yeah, b4. It's got some ideas. It's got an idea of b5 sometimes, knight d4, and also vacates b3 for the queen. It's got at least 3 interesting ideas to follow up with. We have c6. If c5, we're going to get a small edge because we're going to use that d4 square without interruption from any attacking pawn with either e5 or c5. They've gone. So we get a nice d4 square with a small positional edge. So that forcing move is kind of forcing move is not a good idea here. Not all forcing moves are great. So c6 is played. So this does look like a London system in reverse. It's difficult to crack a London system quite often. Knight d4 is tried. If b5, kind of minority attack idea, but black doesn't have to do that to allow that pawn to be taken. c5, and actually this is just even. This position here would just be even. If white plays knight takes e4, that does black a favour here. Black plays queen f6, and black is sitting better with this kind of dangerous, potentially dangerous pawn on c5 being a passed pawn here. Now white doesn't have to indulge that, so b5 is just not working here very well. It's only even, it seems. So knight d4, bishop h7, queen b3, knight e5, a4. So here, if f4, I mean, you might wonder f4, the knight would just go back, and this is just an even position. Pawns don't go backwards. This is quite a committed pawn structure. So anyway, a4, we have rook c8, and one of the ideas, it seems, is to just prepare b6 here, which could then prepare c5. If b6 was played here, in this position, f4, and yeah, there's a problem with c6. So if the knight goes back, we do take on c6, big advantage. If knight c4, we can actually, that is threatening knight takes d2, we just take on c4, big advantage for white. So rook c8, preparing b6, just safeguarding c6. We have a5. So here if b5, c5 is strong, knight d3. This is nice for black. After d4, c4, yeah, we're being pushed around, and this is very comfortable for black with advantage. So a5, we have b6, the knight drops to f3. So tempting might be at move 16, bishop a6. Doesn't do too much. The rook hangs around protecting c6. f4, knight g6, this position, knight e7, and let's say f5. Black gets in c5 to undermine f5. So now f5's weak. It will be like a swap of prisoners, as Nimzovich would say, exchange of prisoners, that pawn for the f5 pawn. The end result here is just even. So bishop a6, it doesn't seem to lead to too many exciting things. f4 is actually a mistake here in this situation. Guess what black plays for 10 points? Which is a pain. Black actually does have a painful move here. Yeah, it's knight c4. This is a pain. Because if we take queen takes, there's c5, and now we're running into this issue with queen takes d2 actually, not bishop d3, queen takes d2. And black's getting a nice advantage. If if b takes, sorry, in this position, if knight f3 had been played, then indeed with knight f3, now forget, there's no queen takes d2, but there's bishop d3. So that's why this whole thing makes f4, knight c4 a pain, actually. And yeah, if the knight goes back here, then b5 is indeed very nice. You know, it looks like a position which, you know, white's going to have winning material prospects like knight takes a7. But the issue is knight c4. So this for me is one of the more interesting behind the scenes variations. Knight c4 is a pain here, it does seem. So yes, we don't want to take here, or in fact anyway, if here's c5 and this position is a pain as well, rook b8, this is a total pain where bishop c2 is winning material. So yeah, it's a kind of disaster move, f4, relative disaster move, knight c4. It's not a pleasant position here for white. So this move, knight f3, bypasses those issues. Some simplification, so not very crowd pleasing, I suppose, simplifying here, but black is under a little bit of pressure, you could argue, on the queen side. We don't want to go crazy here, by the way. G takes is just, there's absolutely no time to exploit the G file here. Black just plays d4, and this is just going to be you know, a horrendous position for us. We've just wrecked our position. This G file attack is going nowhere, and for example, knight d5, putting pressure on our pawn structure. It's too much. Knight takes f4 is a nice tactic here for that pinned bishop. It's too much. There's no mileage in G takes f3, just in case you're wondering if you want to hack on the G file. No, don't do that here. So bishop takes f3. Some openings cannot be transformed into a magical attack. They're just not designed for it. So bishop takes f3, d4. So here, if bishop d3, rook fc1, this is no problem actually. The queen can go to b1 here. And yeah, there's a potential issue of d3 in fact coming up here, potential. d4, knight e2, bishop takes, bishop takes. White is a tiny bit better here. So bishop d3 doesn't do black too many favours. So d4, we have knight e2. If e takes d4, queen takes d4, h3. If we take this scenario, even offering that pawn, it's actually just an even position again. You know, this position, there's sufficient play for white to just be equal. There's sufficient to be even. So even if e takes has been played, it's not a total disaster, it seems. Or rook fd1, this again is not a total disaster if there's a bishop on d3, it's even. So anyway, knight e2 is the more solid looking pawn structure. D takes. Here, d3 would be a mistake. This would be a committal mistake. So for example, knight g3, c5. Why is this a mistake? It's because white gets to press on the light squares, amplify the light square control. And actually, yeah, this position, there's quite a bit of pressure building up. For example, c4 could be dismantled here after f4. That's just one example. So yeah, d3 is pretty committal. It's unnecessary. So knight g3, c5. If b5 here, rook fc1, backward pawn though. So d takes e3 played. Okay, so this takes away the kind of any long-term liability in black's position, dissolving that d pawn. So d takes e3. If f takes e3, black does actually get a small edge here with c5. I know some might be excited about this f file, but in this position, no, it's just a small edge for black. If queen takes d2, this position, queen takes, bishop takes, it is also an even position. White does have enough play here to be even. Okay, with the pressure on b6 as well, it's even. So d takes, though is played. We have bishop e4, so more simplification. The reverse London system bishop wants to exchange itself off to relieve the pressure on c6. If knight e4, we can play rook fd1, and let's say knight d2, queen c3, knight takes f3 check. Even though white's pawns are doubled on this occasion, it's not such a big deal, it's even. If we played a takes b6, knight d2 does win the exchange, and we don't get enough compensation. So for example, this position, bishop d3 and then bishop a6, we do not get enough compensation, and that pawn is eliminated. Black's slightly better there. So anyway, bishop e4 is played, rook fd1, queen e7, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4. So simplification, knight c3, rook fd8. If knight takes c3, yeah, we're simplifying even further now. Just the heavy piece endgame here is just even, as you might expect. We don't want to play a move like b5, by the way, because we've just given black on a plate a protected pass pawn potential. So black would have a slight edge here, arguably. Black has a slight edge. Okay, so anyway, in the game though, rook fd8, so more simplification, h3. It's difficult to go wrong here. I mean, taking on d8 is not such a big deal mistake to give black the d-file even. It's still an even position. So anyway, h3, c5. Now rook takes d8, b takes c5, b takes rook c1, queen e5, queen c2. So that pawn is protected. The other option, queen c4, doesn't really give white too many major prospects either. It's even. So queen c2, rook d5, g3, f5. Okay, so this looks a little bit committal, but it's not a big deal actually. It doesn't seem like this is a big deal. e4, rook e5. Yeah, so okay, let's just go with this. E takes, rook takes f5, queen e4, queen d5. Queen g6 is also possible. Again, it's not really a big deal. The situations here that emerge, they're just even. So queen d5, the queen's come off, and the king is heading to e4. We get this check. The king's pushed back. So the thing is, if king e5, then the rook can go to d2. And if f4, rook d3, actually white is under pressure here a little bit, even though it's technically even. White perhaps is under unnecessary pressure to draw, but it's technique draw as well. But king e3 is safer, rook d5, king e4, and then just a repetition draw in the end here. So okay, so this game, solid game from both players. Black kind of playing a reverse London system, white trying to play a reverse kind of Nimzo engine, but it didn't happen like that. Black is not obliged. Black just played a reverse London system setup. So okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Please do check out the playlist link, Kingscrusher TV WC 2024, and I'll have chess courses at Kingscrusher TV with discount if you want to check those out as well. Okay, thanks very much.